Hello and thank you for joining us. We are 14 games into the season and we have a surprise league leader in France. Racing Club de Lens are continuing to defy the odds. Pierre Sarge's team taking advantage of slips by both PSG and Marseille to defeat Angers on Sunday and surge to the summit of Ligue 1. For the first time in 21 years, can Les Sonyors keep it up? Do PSG need to be worried about their form? And do Marseille have the stomach for a title challenge? It's all coming up in Across the Channel, the French football podcast. Welcome along. We have another bumper edition coming for you. We're going to hear from the former Cameroon international Sébastien Bassong in a few minutes. But before then, let me introduce my guest. Just a second appearance, I believe, this season for the elusive Baptiste Renaud. It is great to have Baptiste back. He is a French football expert, a nice bloke, and the host of the podcast, Le Classique. How are you doing this morning,
I'm doing
Baptiste?
great, Matt. Thanks again for having me on, and delighted to be talking about a really, really competitive Ligue 1.
It's good to have you. You were on in one of the early episodes, but because you're one of these guys who has a real job, and you've been pretty busy, but it's great that you've been able to free up a bit of time this Monday morning. If you haven't done so already, please, listeners, take a little moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast hits. Also, check out our YouTube page and subscribe on YouTube at across_the_channel. We are relying on your support as ever to keep on growing and indeed keep on going. We're going to have a deep dive on the new Ligue 1 pace setters Lens in the second half, but let's start in the Principality. Monaco inflicted a second defeat of the season on PSG. Takumi Minamino got the game's only goal on 68 minutes. Baptiste, Paris Saint-Germain have lost twice now. That's two more defeats than this time last season, and they are looking vulnerable. Do you think that, as Luke was saying, that the physical demands of the past year are going to keep on hampering them?
It looks this way. I mean, they've gotten injuries to key players. They're struggling to get any sort of continuity in their starting 11. I think it's something that struck a lot of people. And they're having to play young players like Jantou and Mayulu, a lot of minutes, and it's maybe slightly too early for them. It's a lot more comfortable for those young players to sort of come in when you're running away with the league and there's very little at stake. In this case, PSG are being threatened. And I think teams are also coming into games and thinking there's a possibility to have a positive result. And there's been a change of mindset across the league as well, which we're seeing in games. So they're obviously in the title race. They're still the favorites, but it's good to see them being challenged. We're nearly halfway through the league season, and they're still, being challenged, and teams are taking the game to them.
Yeah, there were signs on Saturday, I thought, when Ousmane Dembele came on, in particular. I mean, he's going to make such a difference, isn't he, when he's fit? You kind of forget just how good he was in the last 6 months of last season, and he played, 15 minutes or so. He came on again against Tottenham, so we can imagine that he might be starting against his former team at the weekend, and that's going to make a difference, isn't it? Because, like you said, it was Njontu playing up top against Tottenham as the false nine, Mayulu against Monaco. If you have Dembele there, it's a different question.
Yeah, I mean, the quality is undeniable, and I think what we're also witnessing is not just injuries, because we're also talking about, Doué is injured. It's full. We've got Hakimi is off at the moment, obviously, and Zaire Emery is having to step in. But it's also certain players haven't really stepped up. I think if we look at Bradley Barcola, he kind of started the season pretty strongly, but over the last few weeks, it's felt a little bit like he's running on fumes as well. And, greed is good, Gordon Gekko would say, but and they got a lot of money from the Club World Cup, but that's obviously been very, very disruptive to the season. And, last season, they had a really, really clean bill of health for the first time in a while, and that obviously paid off. And that's obviously a factor that comes in to every season. But this year, they're struggling on that front. And they took the gamble of relying on continuity and bringing up those youngsters. And PSG is one of the world's best academies. But it's proving slightly difficult. I mean, as difficult as being in second place in your league can be and right in the title race.
Yeah, I mean, they may well be 6, 8 points clear at Christmas. We'll have to wait and see how it goes. Right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
it's exciting. I think you make a good point, and it was interesting. You mentioned Barcola; he didn't even come off the bench when they needed a goal. So you wonder if Luis Enrique is thinking that physically maybe he needs a bit of a break. And I think you can add Kvaratskhelia into that discussion as well. Absolutely incredible last season. The only guy I think who managed to win 2 league titles in one season, because he did it for Napoli and PSG plus the Champions League. But he's lacking that little burst, that little sort of bit of quality that we absolutely know that he's got. And at some point that's going to come back. Listen, Baptiste, I want to talk about
Yeah.
Paul Pogba. At the end of the game, so Pogba played for 12 minutes and he showed some nice touches. At the end of the game, Pogba went across to the Monaco supporters. There were great celebrations, but the TV cameras picked up an exchange that he had with the Monaco fans. He was saying, "We're in this fight together. We're going to keep on going. This is just the beginning." He was talking a good game, but then he dared to say, "You guys need to create a bit more atmosphere. Come on!" And it was interesting because you could hear the ultra, I don't know if he was the capo, one of the chief ultras, saying, "Don't worry about us. We've been creating atmosphere here for the last 30 years. You concentrate on sweating for the cause and fighting for Monaco." And Pogba sort of looked a little bit sort of surprised. He said, "Yes, come on," and sort of kept the celebrations going. What did you make of that?
The first one is, welcome to Monaco. If you think the atmosphere isn't great, that's what happens when it struggles to fill 18,000 every game, right? I think that's a objective criticism that's been aimed without taking away from the ultras who are there and put a good atmosphere. But I think, Pogba, he's always been, loved and vilified for the fact he's very confident, and so it doesn't surprise me that he's gone into this. I think he's kind of riding on a high. I think he's just very, very happy to be back playing football.
Yeah.
And I just find it funny when you compare it to and contrast it with the welcome he got in Rennes. When he came on and he got a round of applause from the Rennes fan for everything he did for France. And I think on the whole, people do like Pogba in France, and so it's funny that he plays his first home game, plays more minutes, wins a very important game against the title winners, and is just tries to hype himself up a little bit and hype the team up, and that's the reaction that he gets.
But it was such a I know, it was such a nice moment. Like Monaco had been down in the doldrums. They get this win over PSG. Pogba is on the way back, and suddenly the future looks bright. But the ultra was having none of it, putting Paul Pogba back in his place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those ultras. We all remember the ultras at Lyon a couple of years ago when they berated the players and taught them a lesson like you would naughty school children. And it doesn't really surprise me that somebody like Pogba who's just arrived. I think people have been waiting for him to play as well, which has been a little bit harsh. Like, he hasn't played for 2 years. Of course, he's going to need months to come in. But the fact that Monaco have based a lot of their campaign, PR campaign, social media campaigns around Pogba's back, and I think people were kind of waiting for him to get back on track. Now with his return come expectations, and I think I can imagine the capo being like, "You played a total of 15 minutes. Like, hold on, we've suffered through the 4-1 defeat at Rennes. Like, good for you, but we've got bigger fish to fry."
Yeah, do not mess with the ultras in Ligue 1, even if your name is Paul Pogba. Another little anecdote from the weekend, Baptiste. I was reading L'Equipe newspaper yesterday. There was an interview with Alexandre Letellier, who was the third choice Paris Saint-Germain goalkeeper for 4 seasons. And in this interview, he tells a story about one day at the training ground. He says, "I went into the toilets and I saw Ney sitting on the toilet with the door open. I said to myself, why is he doing that with the door open? I was shocked. I went straight back out. And Abdou Diallo saw me looking a bit perplexed, standing on my own. And he said, 'Alex, is everything okay?' So I said, 'Listen, I've just seen Ney taking a dump with the door open.' And Abdou said to me, 'Oh, don't worry, that's normal. He's just claustrophobic. He never locks the door. He always leaves it open.'" What do you make of this? I mean, we know that Neymar is a bit of a sort of unique personality, claustrophobic or exhibitionist? What do you think?
Who knows with Neymar? The only certainty with Neymar is that he does seem to find himself in Rio de Janeiro towards end of December, early January when the Carnival is going on. But yeah, I think it's just it's it's a great story from somebody who loves the club in L'Hôtelier, who's got a funny background and was, I think, very happy to be the third keeper towards the end of his career. But it's just for me the image of him ending up on a training ground, and I think he said something like, "I was just sort of muttering to myself in disbelief," and that's why Abdou Diallo came over because he was genuinely worried for my mental health at that moment in time. I think just adds a great just a great picture, and I think it's just a little side
Yeah.
note on L'Equipe. I think every weekend they have those little features called Parole Decks. It's sort of ex-players, testimonies, and there's always a good story that comes out of it, and a regular feature tends to normally be sort of who's the wildest party goer that you ever played with, and everybody's like Suleiman Diawara without a doubt. So I'm not surprised when it comes to PSG that there's always an anecdote about Neymar, because he seems to have been, whether you like him or not, he seems to have been quite a character in the dressing room.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised because he was always very good in tight spaces on the pitch. So I'm surprised he's got an issue with the cubicle
Yeah.
door. But listen, you're right. It was an entertaining interview, and there was more to it than that particular anecdote. But I have to say that stood out. Let's just finish on PSG because we've got a little extract of an interview coming up. And before PSG lost at Monaco, they defeated Tottenham in the Champions League in a thrilling match. And I was able to have a chat with the former Tottenham player Sébastien Bassong. Bassong was a Cameroon international defender. He grew up in Paris. He played for Metz at the start of his career before crossing the Channel to represent Newcastle, Spurs, Norwich, Wolves, Watford and Peterborough. Let's hear what Sébastien Bassong had to say. Thank you for joining us on Across the Channel, Sébastien Bassong. I understand you were in Paris, back in your hometown, to see your hometown team, Paris Saint-Germain, playing one of your former clubs, Tottenham. It was a pretty exciting night, wasn't it? 5-3 to PSG. What was it like for you, Sébastien, first and foremost, watching those two teams? I imagine that, they're clubs that mean a lot to you.
Yes, indeed. They both mean a lot. And that's funny because prior to the game, people kept asking me, who do you go for? Who do you root for? Who do you support? And unfortunately, I had to say that my heart was going for Paris, because I'm a born and bred Parisian, and PSG has always been my team, the team I was rooting for. So yeah, that was funny, but that was a good game. Honestly, that was a great game. I really liked the first one, the European Super Cup, because I was really happy because Spurs obviously won the Europa League and PSG the Champions League, so I couldn't be happier. But for that one, I think the best team won because, and not being biased, the best team won. It was a mixed feeling for me, but at the end, I was really happy.
What have you made of Paris Saint-Germain this season? They're obviously going through an incredible period in their history. Like last season was absolutely fantastic. They decided not to strengthen too much, in terms of bringing in new players in the summer. They've had injuries. It's been difficult for Luis Enrique. And again, against Tottenham, they were missing important players. There's a bit of criticism about the defending at times. Zabani and Chevalier, the two players who came in, probably haven't shown their best football yet. But PSG are top of the league in France. They're looking good in the Champions League. And are you confident that things are okay and that they can have a really successful season again?
They will have a very successful season. Then how successful they're going to be, that's a big question mark. But I'm sure they'll have a big season. They got a big season ahead. The injuries and the questioning, I think they were about to come. When you're European champion, you have to be under the radar. People have to criticize. People have to have higher expectation, especially with the level of quality of playing that they've displayed last season. Now, I honestly think that what happened to PSG, whether it's the form, but at the end of the day, they're winning, they keep winning. The injuries, it was supposed to happen. And it's more about the way they're dealing with it rather than the fact that it's happening, because it was going to happen. You can't stay on your high horse all the time and, keep rolling over the whole Europe like that. You got to have some adversity. And that's what they're facing. It's new challenges, it's different challenges. Team beating maybe a little bit more prepared for PSG because they made the due diligence. That's what champions got to face. But overall, I'm confident.
And do you think in that dressing room they'll be content, but they'll be also thinking, it's in March, April, May that we need to be fit and we need to be ready, and it's about gearing up for that.
Yeah, it's all about getting ready for March, February, and March. Last season showed them right. Luis Enrique said it from the start of the season. My team's going to be ready in February. He's been criticized, and honestly, he's been dragged in the mud, left, right, and center. Ultimately, he got it right. So I think now it's embedded into the player system that we got to hang on. I think they got such an advantage. They got a mat. There's a gap that they can not rely on. They still got to work on, because it's not going to happen like that by magic overnight. But they know what they're working for and what they're working towards. So that's a different PSG this season, especially when you're European champion. You got such a confidence bar. You got to be careful because people are coming for you.
Sebastian, another Ligue 1 club close to your heart. We've got FC Metz in the top flight this season. They had a really difficult start. They were rock bottom, I think, after 7 games, and not just the fact that they were bottom, but they were losing 4 or 5-0. Like, things were tough, and a lot of people were calling for Stéphane Le Mignon to be sacked. And then, they've managed to turn things around. They won 3 games in a row. They moved out of the drop zone. Are you still keeping an eye on FC Metz?
Yes, I have to. My wife is from there, so I ain't got no choice.
What does she think? Are they going to stay up?
Are they going to stay up? I think it's going to be tough, because it's obvious they had a terrible start of the season. Was it expected? Kind of. Not the way they lost games, but we weren't expecting them to be, top half of the table. However, what I liked about them is when you talk about the process, things will come. Yeah, they trusted their own process, and bit by bit, they started to turn things around. They haven't totally crumbled, especially after some heavy defeats. That showed a lot of characters. And Stéphane Le Mignon, I don't think FC Metz can afford to sack him anyway. So they might as well stay together, because he knows the club, he knows the players, he's been promoted with them. I think that shows the mentality of the club. Sacking a manager costs money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but especially in a transfer window, they couldn't really invest. That's not the club that's going to splash the cash. So any addition to the club, they had to be really smart about it. So you're not going to get rid of a player or a manager just like that and, wasting money. So I think that was the right call to do. And until now, I think it's kind of a good one. It's a good shot. The continuity, I'm happy about the way they play at the moment. Hopefully, finger crossed, is going to carry on like that for a little longer.
Well, that was Sebastian Bassong talking to me just before the weekend. We may have brought some bad luck to Metz because they lost 1-0 to Rennes on Friday. Rennes with their 4th straight victory, climbing up to 5th, thanks to Valentin Rangier's goal. Metz are back in the bottom 2 now, and they are facing a tough battle ahead. I've done a long-form interview, a really interesting chat with Sebastian Bassong, who is a lovely guy and a really interesting guy. You may have listened to the interview that I did with Tony Cascarino a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be releasing a similar podcast edition, a special bonus edition with Sebastian Bassong, and I do recommend that you listen. He's really interesting on his roots, sort of growing up in the Paris suburbs, his time at Clairefontaine, also at Metz, and the African connection at Metz. He was there with Emmanuel Adebayor and a few other African players. And then his switch to England, and there are some incredible stories, honestly, from his time at Tottenham. In particular, I would say from his time at Newcastle. He only had 1 season, but it was an unbelievable season. So keep your eyes and your ears open for that one. Now it's half time already here. We're going to be talking with Baptiste about Marseille and about Lens in the second half, but a quick look at the rest of the action around France at the weekend. Paris FC 1, Auxerre 1. Auxerre still bottom on 9 points, 2 behind Metz and Nantes. Nantes who were beaten 3-0 by Lyon on Sunday night. Abner Vinicius and 2 goals for Martin Satriano. Lyon up to 6th. A good win for Lille as well, 1-0 away to Le Havre, despite being down to 10 men. Hamza Igaman scoring late on. Lille are 4th, just 5 points off title pace. They're above Strasbourg, who were beaten 2-1 at home by Brest. Difficult times in the league for Liam Rossigne's team. And Lorient defeated Nice by 3-1, a double from Sambu Sumano. Lorient up to 15th. Nice in big trouble. They're still 10th, but only 3 points above Lorient. They've lost 4 games in a row. And Francaise says that Nice are facing a relegation scrap. Baptiste, they finished 4th last season, but like I say, 4 defeats in a row, 6 defeats in a row in all competitions. Do you agree with Francaise?
As a default setting, I would always tend to agree with Francaise. The man knows, the man knows what he's talking about. He knows Liga inside out, and I think he's paying the price of his overachievement last season. In my mind, they should have never finished 4th. They didn't really have the depth or the quality. I mean, Nice are perennial European contenders, but 4th was a bit of a stretch. I think this season they've suffered from a multitude of things. One is there's a lot of injuries. You know, this is always an excuse, but it's the reality at Nice. They've had debilitating injuries to key players,
especially at the
so he's had to sort of try and reorganize and make do with what he's got. Even though players like Sofiane Diop have up top have performed admirably. The second one is perhaps some disinterest from the owner into the club. You know, Jim Ratcliffe. We know who he is. He's got his eyes set on bigger things. And Nice is becoming a bit of an afterthought, maybe. And thirdly, now we're seeing, a lot of tension with the ultras. Although they really respect Francaise. I think he's the one person they've identified as being maybe not faultless, but certainly not the first one to blame. So it's not a really positive dynamic at the moment at Nice. They still have enough quality to be safe. But certainly I think Ez is somebody who strikes me as putting a lot of faith and stock into that sort of dynamism. And when his teams have a really positive dynamic, they go really high, as we've seen at Lens and at Nice. When they're in a negative dynamic, it's always difficult to stop that, and he's acutely aware of it. So I don't think he's over... Part of me thinks that he is maybe overdoing it slightly. Is just to throw a word of caution and maybe get the interest of the owner and get some of the players and the fans to back him. But it's looking pretty dire at the moment.
Yeah, it is looking pretty dire. And we heard Sebastian Bassong saying that it's very expensive to sack coaches. And I'm not saying that Francaise is in danger of being sacked, because like you say, I don't think anybody is blaming him. But he's also signed a contract extension recently. And it would be expensive for them. I'd like to just add to your very, very valid comments about Nice's struggles and say that the recruitment, it looks worse sort of week after week. Florian Maurice, the sporting director, I'll go through a few names. So Isaac Janssen, young Swedish attacking midfielder, 10 million euros from Rapid Vienna. Kevin Carlos, he got on, and to be fair, he had a header that was really well saved by the Lorient goalkeeper Mvogo, but he's still looking for his first Ligue 1 goal. Abdul Samed has looked a shadow of his former self in midfield. Ye Van Djus had a difficult start, the goalkeeper. I'd say the only guys who have brought something positive, Charles Van Oot, the Belgian midfielder, and Kojo Opong, the Ghanaian defender. We saw Gouveia as well, by the way, a Portuguese midfielder on loan. He played left wing back, and he looked very average again at the weekend. So in terms of the recruitment, I mean, Francaise has not been dealt a good card.
No, he hasn't. And I'm quite surprised, because I think Florian Maurice, back in his Rennes days, did some good business. Obviously, he had a decent amount of money to spend thanks to the Pino family, but they had a real idea and they had a real culture that they were trying to bring in. Young developing players, primarily playing in France. They might have to overspend slightly, but they knew they were going to get resale value, like Arnaud Calimundo back in the day. He seems, I don't know, it's a different approach clearly at Nice, and like you said, the reality is it hasn't worked out. So he's obviously been targeted by the ultras, and that's where the lack of quality comes in, and lack of variety, I think, in terms of options. They're quite stale, Nice.
Yeah. And they were lectured to as well at the end
Yeah.
of the game by those ultras who made a very long trip from Nice to Lorient. So I would say sort of fair play to the ultras and the players. I saw Sofiane Diop having a bit of an exchange, and it's become a feature of Nice's season as well. Now, quiz time. Really difficult quiz, a really difficult question last weekend. So maybe I apologise if the bar was placed a bit too high. We did get a lot of our usual suspects getting it right. It was a who am I, current Ligue 1 player. This is the clue. Baptiste, you can let me know if you think this is too hard or not. I enjoyed a very positive and bubbly start to my career in France, but probably only got the recognition I deserved when I made the trip across the Pyrenees. I'm a vastly experienced international now. In fact, I helped my country secure continental glory a few years back. It should be said, though, I wasn't born in that particular nation. But whether we talk about club or country, I do like it in the north, and I'm a big fan of four-legged animals. So, what do you think, Baptiste? It's
tough.
tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, tough. Yeah,
Well, club and country, I like it in the north. So that's Lille or Lens, probably. I can tell you it's Lille. Country, I went with North Africa. He's an Algerian international. He likes four-legged animals, the desert foxes of Algeria, the dogs of Lille. Bubbly start to my France career, so that was in Reims. Anyway, the answer is Issa Mondi.
Oh, yeah.
The vastly experienced Algerian international playing for Lille these days. Abir Bar got it. Banjaxt59 got it. I think that was your first correct answer, so double points for Banjaxt59. Pierre Carpentier, John Crossan and George Rodriguez also correct. George Rodriguez still top of our leaderboard. If you think you know the answer to the question, we do welcome newcomers. League1podcast@gmail.com is our email address. We have prizes as well. Sacré Bleu, my book that I wrote a few years back. Now, that's the second prize. Tom Williams' brilliant book, Va Va Voom, is the first prize. This week's clue is a former Ligue 1 player, and it is another Who Am I? So here we go. When people talk about me, their minds tend to wander back to the 1990 World Cup in Italy. Indeed, that is where my nickname comes from. But let me tell you, I am no joke. I played more than 20 times for my country, representing some very good clubs in France, Spain, and England. I won a league and cup double alongside Karim Benzema, but my career was blighted by some painful losses too. I lost a Champions League final, and also, somewhat embarrassingly, I lost another cup final to Birmingham City. Who am I? What do you think, Baptiste?
I think the 1990 World Cup pieces. I'm curious. About that.
Curious.
It's maybe throwing me off the scent.
Might be a bit of a red herring, that one. But if you do think you know the answer, please do send in your email to league1podcast@gmail.com. Okay, the second half is about to kick off and we are heading down south to the Velodrome, where Marseille drew 2-2 with Toulouse. And for the second time in a month, they squandered an opportunity to go top of the table. Toulouse went in front through Emerson in the first half. A really average first half from Marseille. They improved after the break. They turned the game on its head thanks to Igor Peixau and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. It looked like Marseille were going to move above PSG, but in added time, Santiago Hidalgo headed Toulouse level after a long throw from Mark McKenzie, the American international, who had this sort of new technique he's developed this season, a little bit like a quarterback, but it is a fair throw-in technique. but he gets a lot of speed behind it. Hidalgo with the header. Credit to Toulouse, Baptiste, but does this show some sort of mental weakness at Marseille that they just can't seize the initiative?
They're just so perplexing, Marseille. I mean, they bounced back so well, I have to say, from the whole Rabiot, Jonathan Rowe debacle, which I thought could completely unravel their season. And at Marseille, you're always a minute away from disaster, effectively, or elation. And they bounced back wonderfully from that. And they've performed really well. And in the Champions League, where I think their performances have been pretty good, even if the results haven't always gone their way. And they've always found a way to shoot themselves in the foot. Recently against Sporting, is it Sporting? I think, yeah. Where
Sporting and
I think they were well on top. And I think we're seeing that in Ligue 1. Every time they seem to have an opportunity to take the lead in the league, they squander it, which is a real shame because they play really good football and they've got very interesting players. And like you say, they demonstrated a really good attitude in the second half to really take it to Toulouse. But it was such a soft goal to concede at the end. So I think those are genuine question marks around their mental fortitude, especially when I think, and we'll talk about them later, but when you hear, Pierre Sage kind of talk at halftime in a game against Angers and saying like, we want to be top of the league and we didn't play that way in the first half. It's quite, why is Pierre Sage having that ambition and Marseille can't seem to be able to do it. But it's still a long season, and I think they have still demonstrated a lot of quality over the first 14 games. They just need that little extra step, but I would consider them to be the prime candidates to challenge PSG still.
Yeah, I think most people would agree with you. It's not a disastrous result, but it just kind of feels a bit like the draw they had at home against Angers. Like I said a month ago, when they could have gone top, and now next weekend they go away to Lille, which is really tough. But looking at the goal and the way they conceded it, because I think everybody in the Velodrome thought they'd got off the hook with those two goals, Højbjerg heading in, and it was just the match seemed to be petering out a little bit. But like I say, credit to Toulouse. And some Marseille fans blaming my poor old countryman, CJ Egan-Riley, because he conceded a throw-in, which, maybe he didn't need to concede the throw-in. He sort of put the ball straight out. But, I mean, you should, in the 92nd minute, you should be able to defend a throw-in. And great header from Hidalgo. But you can't blame the young Englishman for that.
In Marseille, you can. I think that's, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of playing for Marseille. Is the passion is as high as anywhere. They're very sort of, can I say, sort of South American like that? The atmosphere, and I think we saw that during the week, right? Newcastle fans and pundits were kind of taken aback by the fervor at the Velodrome. Whilst in France, people were like, it's the Velodrome and it's Champions League night. What else do you expect? So you hit real highs and you hit real lows, and a real low for CJ Egan-Riley might be to have conceded a throw-in and then have nothing to do with the goal that follows, but it's still his fault. So, welcome to Marseille, CJ. Get used to it.
Yeah, but to talk about the football, yes, they are a good team to watch. They have had problems last season and this against low blocks, breaking down low blocks, particularly at the Velodrome. And I do think there's a problem in the midfield. I do feel like they're lacking. I was talking to our friend Andy Scott yesterday saying, God, if you put Valbuena just, in the middle there, tying everything together with Peshao, Greenwood and Aubameyang, it would be a different story. Angel Gomez started, his form had picked up, but he really struggled. He was hooked at half-time and, playing in that slightly higher role just above the sort of double pivot in midfield. We've seen Bill El Nadir, sorry, voice going. We've seen Bill El Nadir playing that role. We've seen Matt O'Reilly, who's, I think, more of a runner than a sort of, composed playmaker who's going to knit things together. They're missing a profile, aren't they, that I think Angel Gomez is struggling to sort of fulfill.
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked Angel Gomez playing as an 8 rather than a 10. I think that's where his real value lies, and that's where he was really efficient at Lille. I'm still surprised that he's not playing Vermeeren a bit more. He's been excellent as sort of a dynamic, half eight, half 10, who's loves the short game, and makes really intelligent runs. I think Marseille play good football. For me, you obviously have the sort of midfield questions, but it's also the defensive weakness is there. I mean, I've never been a fan of Leo Balerdi. I've just think he's been distinctly average, if I can say that myself, as a non-professional football player who doesn't play in the top flight. I think he's always been kind of a mistake waiting to happen, and for him to have been captain to start the season as he did, unfortunately for him, hasn't assuaged my doubts. And then I think you're seeing Pavard and Aguerre, who I'd expect a little bit better from, considering their experience and their caliber. I think defensively they're struggling slightly. The quality of their wing backs isn't really there, and there's a soft center, I think, to their team. And that's what we're seeing. We're also seeing teams. You look at Angers and Toulouse. They came to the Velodrome and they were really unafraid of taking it to Marseille. They knew they were going to go without the ball for a certain amount of time, but to hit them on the break, have strikers over the shoulder of the last defender. They knew what they were doing and it paid off.
I think Aguerd has done really well. Pavard's been like really good, then really bad. And just in Aguerd's defence, because he had a poor game on Saturday, he's just come back from injury, and maybe he's been a bit rushed back from injury. He was absolutely done, though, wasn't he, by Emerson for that first goal. So yeah, I agree with you. It was looking like they were getting that platform with Pavard and Aguerd coming in, but it's hard as well to keep that consistency when you're playing Champions League and Ligue 1. Listen, Baptiste, I want to get on to Lens, because
Yes.
they are absolutely the flavour of the moment in France. But we're going to keep our Lens fans listening just a little bit longer, because it is time for your top a flop. So let us hear. So taking a step back, looking at the action overall, what did you really enjoy? What didn't you enjoy in Ligue 1 at the
So
weekend?
I think I'm going to start with the top. Let's start positively. I think Martin Satriano deserves a real mention. I'm not a huge fan of the Uruguayan. I think he's very hit and miss. But Lyon really desperately need a striker, and they need a striker to be firing. And it was a delight to see the goals he scored, but also, he's gone through a lot of injuries, and he hadn't scored, I think, in 17 games in Ligue 1, which maybe explains how he ended up at Lyon, because he was cheap. But if he can carry on some form or recapture some form and be decisive, then Lyon are going to keep going strongly, and they've already had a really positive output on Ligue 1. So I think it's good opportunity to recognize and reward Satriano. I also think you mentioned, or I remember hearing, that he was a flop.
Yes, I think we gave him a bit of a hammering recently as well. And Lyon, don't forget they're trying to replace Mikotadze and Lacazette and Cherki on a shoestring. They've got Satriano in. It's hard to sort of say to him, "Come on, now you've got to replace all the goals that those guys provided." So yeah, no, fair play to him. I think it's nice he gets a shout out, and Lyon will be absolutely delighted to see him back among the goals. Your flop?
Yeah, my flop
please.
is Strasbourg. I think they promise a lot. They have a really talented squad. Losing 2-1 at home against Brest at the weekend was, after taking the lead, was really disappointing, and I think that's echoed by their own manager. Liam Rossigna saying after the game, really, really frustrated by the foul they gave away for the penalty that brought Brest back into the game. He said it's time to stop promising and to start delivering. I think not only is that true, but I think that applies to Liam Rossigna as well. 14 games, 7 wins, 6 defeats, 1 draw, 19 goals conceded. I wouldn't say it's
Be careful, Baptiste. No one's allowed to say mean things about Liam Rossigna on this podcast.
As a Fulham fan,
we're his biggest
fans.
A
Fulham fan, I have a real affiliation with Liam Rossigna, who I really, really respect the job he's done because of the turnover of players, which I think, and you can tell the dressing room is healthy, and tactically he's very, very smart. But I think at some point, considering the amount of money they have spent, quotation marks on the day, you'd expect better ultimately. Like why are Lyon ahead of them? You know, um, and when you look at the chaos that's gone on at Rennes, for example, Rennes are now fifth. They're ahead of Strasbourg. You know, I think you could ask yourself genuine questions.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, and we've given them loads of praise, and it's interesting. I didn't realise that their record was that kind of
Mm.
average, if you like, 7 wins and six defeats, as you say. They did beat Crystal Palace at the weekend, and just to big up Ligue 1 a little bit, we haven't emphasised the fact that Ligue 1 played 3 games against Premier League teams, played
Yeah.
3, won 3 at the weekend. PSG beating Tottenham, Marseille beating Newcastle, and Strasbourg beating Crystal Palace. Maybe that made it difficult for them. But listen, let's see, because you're right. Liam Rosenior has changed his tone a little bit, hasn't he? I'm sure he's still like 100% behind his players, and they're
Yeah,
absolutely
no
behind him.
doubt.
But it's like, okay, yeah, this is, it's all been very nice. We've been getting lots of plaudits, but yeah, this isn't good enough to lose at home against Brest, and to be the flop on across the channel. I mean, that is an all-time low, really, for Liam Rosenior. So I know
Yeah.
it's not him the flop.
Yeah.
It's his team. Baptiste, let's turn to Lens, because what they are doing is absolutely astonishing. I think new coach coming in the summer, Pierre Sage. No big money to spend. They've sold so many players in the last 2 or 3 years, but Sage is managing to rebuild this remarkable sort of combative and very how can I put it? Very collective and just a really strong unit. Anyway, Angers 1, Lens 2. Florian Thauvin scored both goals for Les Saints, either side of a goal from Aruna Djiberin for Angers. Lens have got 31 points from 14 games. They've won 7 of their last 8, and they're top of the league. I mean, who saw this coming?
Well, basically no one. I think everybody respected Pierre Sage, but he admitted himself when he moved that he'd only really known Lyon, and he was unsure as to what he was getting into in a way. And as you said, they lost a lot of players over the summer, over the last few years, and it felt like they were in a different dynamic to what they'd been maybe a couple of years ago. But one thing with Pierre Sage is he's just a really positive. He brings a positive mindset clearly to the club that he manages. We saw that at Lyon, where there was real chaos, and yet as soon as he stepped in, people seemed happy to play, and there was more effort. And certainly at Lyon, there seems to be real cohesion, and already there's obviously areas for improvement, but you can see they're starting to build an identity. They mix it up. If they have to play a bit long and direct, sometimes they do. Otherwise, there's nice little triangles. They started at the weekend with 6 newcomers from the summer in the side, and they look really composed. And I have to say, Angers are a really tough team to play against this season, and Alexandre Dujeune maybe needs a bit of credit as well. And they ended up with 2 18-year-old strikers really putting pressure, a 19-year-old winger, and I think they've got 15 players in under 21 and below selections, which is a real change from Angers. So a little shout out to them. But Lens, I think, are just a mix of players ready to bounce back, like Hudson Edouard, Wesley Said, and I think led by, for me, perhaps one of the smartest players over the last 10 years in Ligue 1, Adrien Thomasson.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that. And he doesn't
Yeah.
get enough love. And he's playing this sort of new role, really, insofar as he's very much like one of the two in midfield alongside Mamadou Sangare, having previously played more as an attacking midfielder. But what an engine, and like you say, what intelligence.
Yeah, he's the heartbeat of that side, and I think he's made life easy for Mamadou Sangare, who's been a real talent, one of the best players I've seen so far this season. But again, their transfer dealings have been smart. They've got the new Kevin Danso and Samson Baidu, a huge shortcut, obviously, but you can't help but see the similarities. And they all seem on board. They celebrated their goals, and they're dedicated to Jonathan Grady, who's been there at the club for a number of years and broke his tibia, I think, at training, had a double fracture, and they all seem to be going in the same direction. And Pierre Sage, he's ambitious, but he's quietly ambitious, and his players respond to him, and the system works. it's very positive at the moment. We'll see how it keeps going, but it didn't seem
And they're so
completely
yeah,
out.
and they're so strong. Sorry, I cut you off, but they're so strong
Yeah,
at home as well. So if they can start winning away, and it's interesting you said, yeah, PSG quietly ambitious. He said after the game that they're not yet at their best level, which is fascinating because usually, you know, if you're the Lens manager and you go top of the league, you'd be like, well, you know, let's just enjoy it while we can. But he's not saying that. He's saying, well, I think we can play better than this, which is interesting. And the other thing I noted, you mentioned Thauvin dedicating his goals to Jonathan Grady, who's obviously a very popular player and a really important player. I think they're going to miss him over the long term on the right side of that back three. He was on video link up in the dressing room after the game as well from his
yeah,
hospital bed,
wow.
joining in the celebrations. And I think that, you know, that I don't want to be too cheesy, but that, you know, this is kind of what we
Yes.
like about Lens. They've always had that very sort of friendly feel. You know, you're part of a family if you're at Lens, aren't you? Whether that be a supporter or a player.
It's a great club, great support, iconic kit. It's always had those values throughout the club. You knew that you were going to get a tough game, but a fair game with Lens, and they keep doing that. And their transfer dealings now, as you see them playing out on the pitch, they all make sense. They've all targeted players according to their strengths. I think the thing with Pierre Sarge as well is he puts players in positions of strength, in positions to succeed. Nobody's playing out of position. Everybody's playing with real freedom. And I think it's a great story across the club. You know, we talked about Thomasson. You look at Hudson Edouard, who had tons of injuries and his career was going nowhere. He's bounced back. Same for Wesley Said. Florian Thauvin is finally getting a recognition that he deserves for being one of the best Ligue 1 players of the last 10 years and being a World Cup winner that everybody seemed to sneer at, but he is a World Cup winner. Real positivity. And I have to say, Lens, they had a real tough run of games to start the season. So there's a real opportunity there if they keep going from strength to strength.
And, you know, they've lost a whole defence in Kutunov, in Danso, in Medina. Brice Somba, the goalkeeper, left mid-season. He's been brilliantly replaced by Robin Rissa, who is a young French goalkeeper who looks really good. So, yeah, fantastic. And I think we need to name the guy mainly, I think, responsible for the recruitment, Jean-Louis Leca, who is just sort of starting out as a sporting director. And, you know, what a job he is doing. And honestly, like, I don't know the guy personally, but having seen him, he was a very feisty, fiery goalkeeper, and not the sort of profile I would have thought, you know, he'll be a really sort of intelligent recruiter, but he's clearly very good at the sort of man-to-man discussions. So I've heard a lot of stories about how he's convinced players, notably Florian Thauvin, to join Lens, as well as, you know, picking out the talent and finding the players who are hungry. Because, you know, we've mentioned Sangare, who's been compared a lot to another former Malian at Lens, Seydou Keita, who was such a fantastic player and moved to Barcelona and had a great career. And Samson Baidu as well, the Austrian. You get the feeling that these guys are going to be the ones moving, hopefully not soon, but for 50, 60, 70 million, you know, in the next couple of years. They look like real gems. So Jean-Louis Leca has just started amazingly, hasn't he?
100%. I think there's something in the water at last for ex-players who love playing in Corsica, because Florent Ghisolfi also started there, right? I think he's at Sunderland now, Ghisolfi, and he's working wonders, clearly. So, you know, they're giving a chance to those sorts of people who know the league and are ready to use different networks and also still keep the sort of Lens ethos, right? It travels, and I think also credit needs to go to Joseph Ougolian, the owner, right? I think he when they went on the Champions League high, I think he realized they were on a bit too much of a high and they overspent. And but he's always also sort of backed his directors of football, and he, in the sense that he kind of lets them get on with business, and he's really not a disruptive presence. So everything's working very positively at Lens, which is great. Whenever Lens do well, the league does well. In a way, it's a club that people should follow a bit more, I think, because they do like we said, they have really good values, and it's a part of France that has always been really, really passionate about football. And so it's good that they're doing it, and they've been one of the most consistent sides in France over the last 5 or 6 years since they've come back. So it's well deserved.
Absolutely. Thank you, Baptiste. Next weekend, Lens travel to Nantes, who are 16th and haven't won in 5. So a chance for Lens there to get another win. We've got Lille against Marseille, a massive game. PSG versus resurgent Rennes. That should be really good as well. Just before you go, Baptiste, is there anything that you would like to tell the listeners about? Anything you'd like to promote, or social media, or anything you want?
Yeah, no, thanks, Matt. I'm one half of a podcast called Le Classique, and we focus on French football history, and as much as possible, it's links to the UK as well. So, we're releasing episodes when we can because we're both full time. But we're about to finish our, a series that we did on the top 50 French Premier League players of all time, and I think we've got a delightful guest that's about to come on for that to finish the series. And we're always delighted to talk, especially on Twitter, about French football and give our insights on new players to come up through the ranks, the Liga talents, and a little bit of French football history. And so hit us up and support us, and as a whole support the French Liga podcast community. There's a lot of good people out there, obviously, and it's a fascinating league.
Good man. Thank you very much, Baptiste Renaud. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and hopefully we can get you on a little bit more regularly through the season. Work commitments.
Absolutely.
Cheers, and thank you to everybody for listening today. It's been a lot of fun, and of course we'll be back next week with the latest news from this fascinating season in France. Until then, au revoir et à bientôt.